Good morning. Welcome to Close Reading this week. It's good to see you guys all today, even though I can't actually see you. I'm imagining you in front of your screens working hard. So we are working today. Last week we finished up the packet that was titled Week 4. So we're actually starting Week 5 this week. Remember, the dates are wrong. You can cross those out, okay? So you'll need your close reading packet today, a pen or pencil, something to write with. And then definitely get your Number the Stars book, because even though we're not necessarily going to be reading from Number the Stars today, it's going to be really good to have it close by, because there's going to be a lot of themes in our text today that connect with Number the Stars. Please don't forget, make sure that you guys are doing these front pages. This is really going to help you really understand our text, work on those vocabulary skills, all those things that you guys should be doing as good readers. Go ahead and flip the page of your Week 5 packet. And we're going to be right here in this text right here, Excerpt from Trail of Tears Diary. A couple of things before we start today. One, we're going to watch a quick video about what the Trail of Tears was before we read this excerpt from a diary. Two, remember that excerpt, it just means a small piece of a larger text. So when we're seeing this word excerpt here, we know it's not the whole text, it's just a small piece. Okay, so I'm just going to write that here. So a small piece of a larger text. We know an excerpt is not going to be the whole text, okay? So another thing I wanted to show you and to kind of explain before we jump in is that this is part of a diary. And we talked earlier about Anne Frank's diary. And so when we think about diaries, we need to realize that they are nonfiction pieces of work because they're telling a true story. This is nonfiction. But they can be written kind of like a story. So you're going to be using some good thinking skills from both nonfiction and fiction text that you would read. We would call it literary nonfiction, and in this case, it's a first-hand account. So it's something similar to like a biography, an autobiography, or a diary. Okay, so first-hand account of something that actually happened. Okay, so we're still going to be using those nonfiction thinking jobs, but we can definitely still kind of think back to our character wheel, because character traits we see those traits in real humans as well, and not just in our characters, okay? So before we begin, I wanted us to watch a short video just explaining what the Trail of Tears is. And so this video is technically a cartoon, but before we begin, I just wanted to kind of set the stage for you and understand what is happening in our text today. So the Trail of Tears was something that happened many years ago, and what you need to understand about this time period is, just like we're studying right now, we're studying the Holocaust, we're studying World War II. This was a really dark time in American history. And so, you know, we can learn a lot of things by studying from the past so that we don't make the same mistakes again. But even though this is a cartoon video, I want you to understand that this was a really difficult time and a really dark time in our history that we shouldn't take lightly. So as we're reading, it's really important for us to read these kind of texts, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage for you of what to kind of expect and what to think about this period of time. So we're going to watch this video, and when the video is done, we're going to jump into our text today. Okay, thanks for watching that video. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding of what we're going to be talking about today. This section up here at the top is going to set our setting for us. And so we'll be able to know what period in history this is talking about. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. Before we do, we want to make sure that we put our thinking job at the top. I already told you it was nonfiction for this one, so we're going to put our nonfiction thinking job at the top. And we know we need to identify the topic and then identify our key question for what is the author teaching us about whatever the topic is. Okay, so our topic is going to be Trail of Tears today, so we're going to put that in our topic. Okay, and then when we're thinking about our key question, what we're going to keep coming back to, what is the author teaching me about the topic? And that is the Trail of Tears in this text. Oops, sorry, I put topic, but it should say Trail of Tears. And I am capitalizing Trail of Tears, even though it's in the middle of the sentence, because it is a title. So make sure that when you're thinking about, as you're writing, especially in your written responses at the end of this text, make sure that you are using Trail of Tears as capitalized, because it is a title. We don't capitalize of, just Trail and Tears, the T in Trail and Tears. Okay, so we have our topic, we have our key questions, so we're going to go ahead and start reading. Remember, I told you this section up here is going to give us background information, so we're going to start right there. Okay. The Trail of Tears is the name given to the forced relocation of Native American nations following the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The removal included many members of tribes who did not wish to assimilate. Many Native Americans suffered from disease and exposure, and somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 Cherokee died on the trail. The Trail of Tears diary includes interviews that reveal the extraordinary resilience of the Native American nations during the trail. As you read, take notes on how the perspectives of the two Native American interviewees differ. So today in our text, we're going to see two different examples of what happened during this time period. We're going to see two different perspectives. So think about how these perspectives are different and how these people portray what happened in a different way. Also, as we're going, I saw a few different vocabulary words that are going to be important for us today. When we're talking about relocation, it means to be moved to a different place, okay? And when relocation is your choice, relocation is not a bad thing. For example, if I were moving from, or when I was a kid, I moved from Chicago to Dallas because my dad got a different job. And he was very excited about this new job. And so we relocated because we wanted to, okay? But it's this issue right here, this forced relocation, that's going to be an issue in our text today. When you are made to relocate to a different place, when you did not make that choice yourself. Okay, so that's what we're going to be reading about today. And as we read, I also want you to be thinking about connections that we see between our example in Number the Stars, or the way the Jews were treated, and connections to this text as well, as the Native Americans were treated during the 1830s. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Interview with Mary Hill, age 47. April 19th, 1937. Billy Bird, research field worker, S149 Mary Hill, Muskogee tribe, Okfuskee town, Tula, Okemah, Oklahoma. The migration to the west of the Muskogee. Many years ago, my grandmother, Sally Farney, who was among those that made the trip to the west from Alabama, often told the trip as follows. So we're going to pause right here, and we see that Mary Hill is the one who is telling the story of her grandmother, Sally Farley. So this is going to be Sally Farley's story. I'm going to put Sally's story told by Mary, and Mary is her granddaughter, okay? So we see grandmother here, so we know Mary's her granddaughter. So this is her account. In every way, we were abundantly blessed in our everyday life in the old country. We had our hunting grounds and all the things that are dear to the heart or interest of an Indian. Keep going. A council meeting was mostly composed of men, but there were times when every member of a town was requested to attend the meetings. Many of the leaders, when unrest was felt in the homes, visited the different homes and gave encouragement to believe that Alabama was to be the permanent home of the Muskogee tribe. But many different rumors of a removal to the far west had been often heard. We're going to pause right here. And I want you to go back to this page right here, and it says, in every way we were abundantly blessed in the old country. Right here in the old country, this tells me that they're talking about Alabama. Oops, you can't, sorry. Didn't realize you could. They're talking about Alabama here. They used to live in that area. And so this is in Alabama before they were forced out. Okay. So this is before they were removed. Let's go back to our text here. So I'm going to pause right here. And I'm going to think about what is the author teaching me in these first few paragraphs about life before the Trail of Tears. Okay. And I noticed already that life was good for Native Americans in their land before the removal. So life was good for Native Americans before the removal. Let's keep reading. The command for a removal came unexpectedly to most of us. There was the time that we noticed that several overloaded wagons were passing our home, yet we did not grasp the meaning. However, it was not long until we found out the reason. Wagons stopped at our home, and the men in charge commanded us to gather what few belongings could be crowded into the wagons. We were to be taken away and leave our homes to never return. This was just the beginning of much weeping and heartache. I see two key things here as I was reading. I see that this came unexpectedly, which means that they were not thinking it was going to come, and that this was the beginning of weeping and heartache, and they would never return. This teaches me, when I'm thinking about what is the author teaching me about the Trail of Tears here, that the removal from their home was painful and sad. And I can tell this just by looking right here. They were only able to take a few of their belongings. They never were able to go back. And there was weeping and heartache. This tells me it was really painful and really sad for them. We were taken to a crudely built stockade. Remember in the video they said a stockade was like a jail. And joined others of our tribe. We were kept penned up until everything was ready before we started on the march. Even here, there was the awful silence that showed the heartaches and sorrow of being taken from the homes and even separation from our loved ones. Most of us had not foreseen such a move in this fashion or at this time. We were not prepared, but times became more horrible after the real journey was begun. Many fell by the wayside, too faint with hunger or too weak to keep up with the rest. The aged, feeble, and sick were left to perish by the wayside. A crude bed was quickly prepared for these sick and weary people. Only a bowl of water was left within reach. Thus they were left to suffer and die alone. The little children piteously cried day after day from weariness, hunger, and illness. Many of the men, women, and even the children were forced to walk. They were once happy children, but now left without a mother and father, crying, could not bring consolation to those children. We're going to pause right here. And as I was reading about some pretty terrible things, that they were unprepared for the journey, that it became horrible, that there were feeble and sick people who were left to perish, and we know that perish means die, and that children were left without parents. They were orphans. And so when I think about what the author is teaching me about the Trail of Tears right now, I can say that the author is teaching me that conditions on the trail were so terrible that people died. So the conditions were so terrible on the Trail of Tears that people died. Let's keep reading. There were several men carrying reeds with eagle feathers attached to the end. These men continually circled around the wagon trains, or during the night around the camps. These men said the reeds with the feathers had been treated by the medicine man. Their purpose was to encourage the Indians not to be heavy-hearted, nor to think of the homes they had been left. Some of the older women sang songs that meant, "We are going to our homes and land. There is one who is above and ever watches over us. He will care for us." This song was to encourage the ever downhearted Muskogees. Many a family was forced to abandon their few possessions and necessities when their horses died or were too weary to pull the heavy wagons any further. So what I see right here is that while conditions were very terrible, that the Muskogee people still tried very hard to encourage each other, that they tried to keep up their spirit. And so when I'm writing here, I'm just going to write that the author was teaching me that the Muskogee people tried their best to keep their spirits up. I'm going to pause right there. So right here, this is the very first account that we see, okay? This was the account of Mary Hill, who was telling the story of her grandmother, Sally. Now we're going to look at another example of the Trail of Tears from the perspective from the Cherokee tribe. And this is going to be told by Job Alexander, or this is going to be told by Jesse Bell, and it's the story of Job Alexander. Okay, so we're going to look at the next part of our text. It's short, it's only 2 paragraphs, but I want you to think about how their perspectives are different and what was happening in the text here that's different from what was happening before when Mary Hill was describing the story. I am a full-blood Cherokee Indian born in Going Lake District, Indian Territory, Cherokee Nation, born on March 10, 1854, and raised there. My father, Dune Evnal Alexander, was born in Georgia and was driven west during the immigration. When he's talking about the immigration here, he's talking about the Trail of Tears. All the Indians were gathered up and rounded up by federal soldiers and put in pens and guarded until ready for the move. They were gathered up by the clans and left their gardens and crops, and some of the old homes of the Cherokees are still standing in Georgia. The last group that was rounded up revolted. I see right here that revolted, it has a number next to it, so I know that there is a footnote that goes with it. So I'm going to look down at my footnote here. It says revolt. It means to break away or rise up against. So we know that a revolt is going to be if they fought against or they rose up. So they fought against the government who was trying to remove them. The leader gave the signal to revolt, and all turned on the guards and took their guns away and murdered the guards, and they made for hideaways in the mountains. That is why the Indians are back in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. They were never found or hunted much. So we're going to stop right here. And the author is teaching me two things. I forgot to put my annotation here, so I'm going to go back and do that first. In this first section, it's very similar to the things that we learned in the first text, and that all Native Americans were gathered up and forced out west. That should be a capital N. And we'll just say forced west. So all Native Americans were gathered and forced west, and this is something that we learned from the previous section, but we see that it's stated again here. The second thing I learned is that not all the Native Americans were made to go. Some of them revolted, and so we see here, I'm going to put some Native Americans escaped and stayed in their home lands. Okay. So right here, we have finished our text, and we're going to go back and we're going to fill out our actually, there it is. Yeah, I'm going to fill out my big idea, and I'm going to write it down here. Remember that my big idea is going to be what the author is teaching me about the Trail of Tears in the whole text, okay? So I'm going to write my big idea. I'm not going to read it to you right now. I'm going to give you a second to write your own, and then I'll share mine, okay? So I'm going to actually move my paper away, and I'm going to write my big idea, and then I'll share it with you. Okay, so I finished my big idea. What I would love for you to do when you are finished writing your own big idea, make sure you take those with you to your small groups on Thursday and on Wednesday if you're having small groups this afternoon. But make sure that you are taking your big ideas with you so that your teacher can look at them and so you can discuss with your classmates. Okay, so here's my big idea. Okay. Native Americans were forcibly removed from their homes and made to travel out west in horrible, life-threatening conditions. Some, and I should probably add in here, some did not survive. And we know that some is actually a lot because we saw here at the very beginning of our text that between 2,000 and 6,000 Cherokee and Native Americans were either murdered or died from disease or the other conditions that they experienced on the trail. So we know that it's not just a few, it's a lot of people who were affected by this, okay? So we have our big idea, and I want you to think about, we're actually gonna go down to, if you flip your page over, here are all your questions. You'll get to do that on your own and then take them to your teacher in your small groups. But I want us to look right now at this question here, and I want us to leave with this question, and I want you thinking about this as you go into your small group time. Compare and contrast the treatment of the Danish Jews in our novel, remember our novel's Number of the Stars, with the treatment of Native Americans during the Trail of Tears. So I really want you guys to think, what connections do I see in the way that people were being treated and just the way that the experiences that they had during these times. This really goes back to our unit, and I'm hoping you can see this, but I'll read it to you if you can't. But our central idea of our unit, this for our unit 5, is focused on how people and systems interact with each other and human responsibilities and rights, and reversible and irreversible human action. So we've talked a lot about human rights and what does it mean for people to have human rights, how are people given human rights, what happens when those are violated. Now we're really looking here, reversible and irreversible human actions. I want you thinking now, what actions from the United States do we see here in the treatment of the Native Americans that can't be fixed, can't be changed no matter what we do going forward? Sometimes we have reversible means that you can go back and you can fix it, right? And then we have irreversible actions too. Like if somebody has died, there's nothing that can bring them back. And so we really are, as we think about the treatment of these people, of yes, we know that some things can be fixed, but in the end, some things can. So I want you guys to be thinking about reversible and irreversible human actions and how they affect people within our state, in our country, towns, world, all of those things, okay? So really think about this question as you guys are moving into your small groups today and tomorrow, okay? Thank you so much for coming today. I will see you guys again next week. Remember, no school on Friday, so you'll get your read aloud lesson tomorrow. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and if you're in my small groups, I will see you guys later. Bye.